See, our big audience is here. Okay, I'd like to call the April meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee to order. Please note for the record, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage are in attendance, so everyone's here and accounted for. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the March 13th meeting.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, first item on our legislative agenda, 01318, city emblems, prohibitive uses for the purpose of regulating the use of the city seal, city flag, and city logo. So Alderman Savage, this is your legislation, so you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this was brought to my attention by our IT department because there are a couple of social media accounts that, in their view, are impersonating the city, and they wanted to have the ability to kind of crack down on them. And so I'm open to that idea, and so work with them on this legislation. That's the background, although the legislation would also impact campaign. It would prevent, well, the code, I believe, currently prevents people from using city logo or emblems in campaign literature, but this would actually attach municipal infraction. So that's the background. I do have comments at some point, if you'd like me to do that now or later.
You could go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard from a number of folks, not a huge number, but more than I thought. And that got me reading through it more and thinking more about it. And former Alderman Budge had concerns about making sure that it doesn't limit civic pride, and I definitely agree with that. And I could see how, with the current wording, it could be used or could discourage use of the flag and even wearing emblem pins, that kind of thing. So I do think the way it's currently worded is too broad. I also wouldn't want to prevent the city commission or some other official city body to be prevented from using city logo, or someone in a parade, and I think the current wording does that. So, you know, I'm at the point where I think I do have some suggested amendments if the committee wants to move forward with trying to tweak this for a favorable recommendation, but I'm also not attached to this if folks just think it's a bit too much in terms of overreach.
Well, let me ask, what is the legal uses? What are the legal uses of the logo, the flag, and the seal? Do we have do we have what guidelines there are now? Because departments should be able to use it, our logo or our seal on their department stuff. I'm kind of opposed to departments creating their own. We have one department that's kind of gone away, gone off on that kind of thing. And I think the message should be consistent, the logo, seal, whatever should be consistent in all departments, so it's recognizable as city. But what the concerns that we've heard from the Alderman, the Honorable Joe Budge, what was he talking about specifically? Is it a specific incident or?
Paragraph A of 01318 makes it a municipal infraction for anyone outside the city government to use the city seal, flag, or logo without prior written approval by the city manager. The practice of prior administrations has been to hand out the city logo lapel pins like popcorn. I've handed out a fair share during my tenure as alderman too, and I'm sure other aldermen.
That's not in the code, though. You're
I'm just reading Joe's.
Okay.
Joe's email.
Okay.
I'm sure other alderpersons have as well. 01318 would make the wearing of the lapel pins by the recipients illegal unless each pin were accompanied by, I'm not sure it really does that, this would be difficult. Similarly, no one can display the city flag in a show of civic pride or just a show of proper flag. So like I have the American flag, the state flag, and the MRE flag, but I could also ask for the city flag to fly it off from the front of my house. It could be 4 flags over Arnetteville. But I'm not sure it's as strong as Joe is implying, and actually going back to the language of the legislation, I certainly subscribe to B1, any political purpose, including but not limited to mailers or handouts. But even 2, it says any purpose which would mislead the public into believing such representation implies endorsement, support, approval, sponsorship, or participation, involvement, or association. Now, I could see cutting that back to just say would lead to a misrepresentation that the city of a city affiliation or association, something like that. So I don't think it's as bad as Joe, but I always value hearing from Joe because he definitely turns these things over in his mind, and we miss him.
And to answer your question, Alderwoman, so the code currently, I don't know if you have your book handy, Alderman Arnett, but the code does state that, it does officially state what our city flag is and what our city logo is. But I did not see any kind of restrictions on its use. And my suggested amendments, if because I do think there is value to limiting the use of the official seal and logo. I'm not so sure about the flag. My proposed amendments would be actually to strike mention of the flag because we don't really use that for official business too often, and I think it's good to have people waving it and so on and so forth.
Let's see, thank you, Regina. She put the municipal code on my iPad. Yes.
All right.
Use of city
It's in
funds,
one,
facilities,
Title I.
logos. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Now, if I can pull it up. So it is in 1.08.050. Following holidays.
Other direction, you'll see more of it. There's the flag.
Oh, there's the flag. Okay, banner describes the flag. Doesn't talk about usage. Emblem, city emblem.
I guess this is where Joe's point is relevant, is in A.
Well, didn't he reference the code?
And I do agree with you, Alderman Arnett. I think I'd propose completely removing A. But I guess my first question would be, do my colleagues think there's a value in or a need to be restricting some of the use?
I think that if someone, and I guess there was an example of someone trying to mislead or show that the city was supporting a particular person or position, would be inappropriate. So, yeah, I kind of like your idea of striking A, then we just start off city emblems for representation or near representation shall not be used for any political purpose and for any purpose that would mislead the public. Pretty much short and sweet, and then I think the code should be $5,000, the fine $5,000, but we actually can only do 1,000 is the highest we can fine people. So,
I agree that something needs to be said. I think we find ourselves right now in a position, we have new people who are coming in, especially out of the mayor's office, who don't know the rules, for example. And this is going to happen every time there's an election. So I think the clearer it is in our code, the better it is for everybody.
It's not just elections. Suppose somebody wants to send a solicitation for fire alarms or something like that, and they say, city code requires that you have this brand of fire alarm, and they put the city logo on it. So it could be misused in ways
Yeah.
other than political.
Certainly.
You're right. So how do we address, and I'm looking back at A, because, you know, you said you wanted to start with B. We want to eliminate all of A as an amendment.
Alderman,
Mm-hmm.
if I may, I do have a proposed,
Okay.
maybe helpful proposed, and
Okay.
it does have striking A, and even striking, to begin with, striking city flag. I'm not sure how you feel about flag.
Yep.
And then B, changing B to A and just adjusting that as well.
Yeah, so it's really this emblem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know
this,
if anybody's
yeah.
going to be going door to door or putting a flag. They'll put this emblem. Yeah, so I agree with that.
Well, let me ask, and I agree with the pin, but what about using the logo? Because, you know, people who may be seeking business with the city or encouraging folks to give them an endorsement through the city or running for political office may very well use the logo. Isn't that what you experience?
Mhm.
Yeah. So could we, instead of saying city emblems, just say city logo? Because that's on the flag as well as on the lapel. What
Well-
would be other than the rose and thistle, what would other emblems be?
Well, in the code, there's the seal, which is the circle with the
Mm-hmm. That's
Oh, okay.
right
the
down
woman,
here.
Yeah.
And then what's the other thing in the code? I'll look up how it's worded. Do you have that up?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that. What's that?
Okay, that's the logo.
Okay. So
Mhm.
this is considered. No, this isn't even. This is different.
That's it. That's supposed to be that.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So this
Does
is
it have
considered the logo.
the name Annapolis under it though?
Yeah.
Can't read it. But that is the logo, and that's our pin.
I guess is that what Joe was saying was handed
Yeah,
out?
he was objecting to what was in A. Let me get that back up. Yeah, he specifically, well, he doesn't, he just says the whole ordinance.
What I tried to do, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want to prohibit people from using the PIN. So number 2, we're going to change it to say, to take out participation, involvement, association, and try to limit. Because I think what we don't want to convey is necessarily an endorsement or support or approval or
Mhm.
sponsorship from the city, and that kind of, I think, narrows it a little bit. So people can still wear it to show pride,
Mhm.
just not.
If
Would
that's
you be
what
willing to buy
if
these?
that's what it shows.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, you know, when this was designed during Ellen's
Yeah, you can wear
administration,
it this way.
well, you're not supposed to.
Distress. Yeah.
Right. But it was used to give to people as ambassadors because they had been particularly supportive of the city. Now they seem to be given out without much
I think
consideration.
it's still the same. You know, it's a nice thing to, first of all, I think it's attractive.
It is.
And I think that if people choose to wear it, they're sort of sending the Annapolis message out there. Of course, you have to really squint to see what it is, but I've been asked a lot of times about what the pin is.
Oh, and I'm not objecting to the pin, but I was at an event, a ceremony here in council chambers recently where they distribute these to everybody. You know, so that takes it away from using it as a recognition piece, giving it to somebody who has, you know, and maybe everybody in the room was an ambassador, or the hope is to make them an ambassador, but I just think the distribution has become more wide than was originally the intent, but. But I'm good with, I agree with, under number 2, taking out the participation, involvement, association.
Right. So it's.
But leaving the sponsorship, approval, endorsement, and all those things, I think that makes
Okay.
perfect sense.
I like the amendments.
Mm-hmm.
I would offer a motion that we offer these amendments to the council and that we make a favorable recommendation.
And you're good with the first, it says, the section does not apply to official city commissions and boards.
Yep. Nope, I think it's much better.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a
So-
by, the little black is a by, B-Y. I didn't want to print it out again, so.
So, do we have a second? Actually, it should have been your motion, his second, but that's
Well, I'll move.
because it's
to
your
adopt.
A
amendment.
second?
Further discussion? Hearing none, so all in favor of giving,
Favorable recommendation
favorable
with amendments.
well, I'm looking for the, 013-18 as amended.
So one other amendment, so on the cover sheet, which, let's see, I have to bring that up, where it says the whereas,
Oh, yeah.
I was also wanted to propose striking the last whereas. It says, whereas appropriate regulations are necessary in order to ensure that the city seal, city flag, and city logo are not utilized except in conjunction with official city business.
Yep. Second?
Well, let me ask, what is objectionable about that?
It just seemed a little bit too broad. Again, so people can use
Well,
it
it has the
for
flag.
pride and
So, okay. So there is a, I'm trying to count how many amendments. Which,
That makes sense.
can you
line
send this to
38.
her electronically?
I can, or,
I have one other amendment, though.
oh, okay.
Okay,
We need to create a position in the office of mayor of enforcer who will go out.
okay, do we
And
need to approve
salary
this
be
amendment first?
95,000 hours a year.
Okay,
Should I move again to adopt the amendments as written plus the striking the last whereas?
mhm.
Second?
Any further discussions of a serious nature? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, so 013-18 approved with amendments. Hmm?
Yeah, we voted on the amendments, now we have to.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so we approved the amendments
Yeah.
collectively, and so now I'll entertain a motion to give a favorable recommendation to 013-18 as amended.
So move?
Second?
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Fees and fines, R9-18.
So I do have a comment here that is a serious comment, which is we have some really egregious things that we only fine people $100 for. And while this is certainly, could be an appropriate thing for people to do, I think I'd drop a 0 off and make it 50. First of all, like fees, fines, they can do more than cover the cost, but I think they should be to dissuade activities rather than generate revenue. And so I certainly would want to throw on the table discussion about the size of it. When you look at our fee tables, I think we need to go back through and really analyze those again and make the fees sort of commensurate with the importance of the infraction. I would like us to make a lot of our fines bigger. The only way we can make them bigger now, we use that state form, is if you check off that is now imposed daily.
Right.
And of course, the most intimidating aspect is if we say you must appear in court.
Mhm.
That's how we got a certain property over in Eastport cleaned up. Once we did that,
Mhm.
gee, paint showed up, yards were cleaned up.
Alderman, you sponsored this legislation, so did you come up with the fine?
No,
for
I
it?
did not, and I would be supportive of Alderman Arnett's.
Okay, that, there's two philosophical approaches. Excuse me?
Sorry, I was asking if this was your meeting that you
This is the Rules Committee meeting.
Has anyone come today?
Has anyone attended? You?
We're dealing with legislation right now. Do you have,
Sorry.
are you supposed to be here today?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
You all waiting for someone. There's people that are out there, and I thought maybe they were waiting.
Oh, send them in. We need an audience.
If they're supposed to be here for rules, don't
But we
send them
need-
into the wrong meeting now.
But we need makeup first.
There's a philosophy about punitive and to discourage, and I guess that's why the 500 was to discourage people from doing this. And we had this argument or this discussion about another piece of legislation a couple weeks ago. Do we charge a lower amount for the first fine and increase it for the repeat offenders? Or do you give them a big fine in the beginning to discourage the behavior and then a smaller fine for repeat offenders? Here, it's the same, so.
I like increasing. That's what I know. Some of some of our regulations allow that to
Mhm.
increase it. Yeah, I would propose something like a 50 for the initial and 100 for the repeat.
Or for each piece of literature.
Yeah, there you go.
I would second that motion.
Okay, so 50 for the
First
initial
offense.
offense and 100 for each additional offense. Okay, I personally think it should be the other way around. I think you hammer it to stop it, nip it in the bud,
I
and
kind of
then,
agree with you, but
and then, you keep hitting them with the smaller amounts later, but you stop the bad behavior up front. That's the teacher in me.
Okay.
That's right, so let's make it $1,005 for each edition.
So, but that's your motion, that we make it 50 for the first fine and 100 for the repeat.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that was on the amendment, now we need to vote.
Need to vote. So the amendment is to change the fine, initial offense 50, second, repeat 100. So all in favor of R 918 as amended, please say aye.
Aye. And that's to recommend favorably.
To raise, exactly. I would be interested in knowing where that 500 came from now, since it wasn't your,
I think it's Jacqueline. I think she really wants to crush the copies.
I suspect somebody told her to put that in there. I can't imagine that she did that independently. Okay. And I think that exhausts our agenda.
It does. Are you interested in information for the good of the order, since it'll be coming to us?
Sure.
So I sent the class and comp study to the HR person at the county. And she came back with some really good observations. First of all, she pointed out that it's not a comp study, it's a salary study.
She doesn't think that it is.
She said it is very clearly a salary study, not a compensation, so it doesn't compare us with other counties in terms of our health, all of those kinds of things, our leave policy, our vacation policy. So compensation to me is the total wage bill. It's everything you get by virtue of employment, including post-employment stuff. So if we're really trying to see how we compare with other entities, we really should be looking at the total package. The other thing she said is usually when salary comparisons are done, it's done on the hourly rate, not the annual salary. And if it was done on the hourly rate, again, we would have to make adjustments for people who work a 7.5-hour day versus people elsewhere who work an 8-hour day, which is a pretty significant adjustment. You would have to increase our salaries or decrease the other salaries by 12.5%. So that was one finding. Geez, I'm trying to remember. I just got off the phone with her. So, what were some of the others?
Well, maybe
yeah,
we'll
the
have her come,
comparators.
because obviously
Well,
she's
she's
an
coming to
expert
class.
in,
No, we could,
in
yeah.
comp class, but I would like to have somebody else also, because I don't want to
Sure.
hit, I don't,
Yeah.
I want it to be balanced.
Here's the other thing. She says that the comparators were not appropriate. That we were clearly comparing to other counties that had much higher salaries and much higher costs of living. So that comparison was not fair. And then she was saying that whoever did this study never contacted the county. There was never any discussion of the county and their compensation packages.
Oh, so the county wasn't one of those to which we were
Yeah, the county
comparing?
was one of the comparators.
So to
but
whom did they
they-
speak?
Maybe
Well, they obviously talked to somebody.
Maybe they used the newspaper
well,
because they
and
had
she
data
also
on
said that,
salary.
I don't know. Then that's a question we should ask
yep.
the company.
And she also said that for these kinds of studies, you never compare public to private. They compare public to public.
Mhm.
So I firmly believe, and we committed in the IBB to do this study,
Mhm.
and we need to do it. But if we're going to do it, I think we need to do it right.
Well, and we're assuming that it wasn't done correctly.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
Okay.
there's some questions.
Okay,
There are some things that we need to know more about.
okay. Rob? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Alderman.
Sorry, it's okay. I do see the value in looking at the compensation, the overall package. I think
Yeah.
if they didn't do that in the study, and I can't recall if they did, but I can see the benefit in that, because
And-
then you compare retirement benefit, but also maybe even, I don't know if they would incorporate the health in terms of how much the city covers.
Yeah,
from the
well,
health,
no, they did not.
package.
So it's only salaries. There's no compensation. The holidays, I mean, we may not be giving as many holidays as
Yeah,
other
that'd be
entities.
interesting to see. yeah.
But let me remind us that these things are negotiable. So
Right.
you can compare all you want, but how we got there is the question we should be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Just because our healthcare may be different, higher or lower, doesn't mean that that isn't something that was earned through bargaining,
No, I
so.
totally agree, but
Yeah.
what I do have a problem with is this study being used in the negotiations before
Well-
we've made sure that we've got it right. And I know, because David has told me, that it is being used, and it's being used asymmetrically. They want to raise all of the ones that are from the comparisons are lower than other counties, and they don't want to lower all of the ones that are higher. And I just don't think that is fair. I think that if anything, we should be looking at some kind of aggregation. That was the other thing. I don't know how the overall comparison was aggregated. Did they look at one person or everybody in a particular category? So I mean,
Well, we need to have them back before the
Right, we
committee to
do.
make, because we have a lot of questions.
We do.
I just hope that we don't have the expectation that we're going to lower people's salaries when there has been a accumulation of years where salaries have been adjusted for one reason or another. If we're gonna look at this, then we're gonna have to look at everything.
Well, the most important thing we have to look at is the one sentence in there that talks about our compensation philosophy. If there is a compensation philosophy, it's our compensation philosophy. It's not HR's, it's not the city manager's. That is a policy, and we make policy.
Well, and that's true, and why that wasn't part of an initial discussion, I can't answer, and we probably won't get the answer to that. But we all change, and so I believe that it should be a city policy, and wherever it comes from, whether it's, through us initially with staff concurrence, because they're the professionals in these positions, we come and go. So,
And I agree with that, and that's why I think all policies should be reviewed periodically.
absolutely, and endorsed
Because
by.
things change.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that point, and to your point, Alderwoman, I think it would be useful to look at, for example, how many increases city employees have received compared to some of these other jurisdictions. Because I know there is a perception, and I think it might be accurate, that the county employees have received more
They have.
merit
There's no
step
question.
increases
Yeah,
over the
there's no
years
question
than
about
the
that.
city,
Mhm.
or COLA increases
Yeah.
as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
No question, and this year will be no different. Mhm. So, but again, that's all bargained,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of give and take. When you get that pay raise, you're increasing your contribution to something else maybe. So it's a lot of give and take.
And something I've noticed with the county is that they actually do have an organization that represents the non-reps.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
actually do
Unrepresented.
advocate.
Did
They
you
have
know
a
that Corinne
board
retired
of some kind.
last month? She was on the IBB team
I think I do.
representing
Yeah.
the unrepresented.
Yeah, management.
So
Yeah, I did
don't
know that
think
she was
the city
retired.
employees have anything equivalent to that. The city
Not
non-reps.
an official capacity,
Yeah.
yeah, she was sort of dubbed.
But there's an
Yeah.
actual board at the county to help advocate
Yeah.
on behalf of the non-reps.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we could learn, and I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of things we're going to be learning about the county with Teresa showing up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's always, and no matter what the agencies, there's always an unrepresented group.
Right.
And generally, they get what everybody
Yeah.
else gets.
Yeah.
That seems fair.
But if they're unique in some way, they do have their own representation. Principals in the school system have their own union.
Mhm.
Now, the unrepresented that work down at Riva Road don't have their own representative. But they all have the Me Too clause.
Yep.
So if you get it, me too, kind of thing, so.
So the thing that I really like about this study is that it raises, in the first time in my mind at least, that we ought to have a compensation philosophy.
Mhm.
That's kind of what we did in IBB, where we talked about recruit
Mhm.
and retain.
Mhm.
And we talked about issues of fairness. And that's
Mhm.
why I think comparing to other peer groups, we should be doing that. And we should be doing that on a pretty regular basis to make sure we're not getting out of whack in
Mhm.
one direction or the other.
And I think part of our compensation philosophy has to do with our desire, and it boils down to recruit and retain, but to make our employees whole they make a living wage in the city.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want them to be home poor because they work for the city. Employees that are well taken care of work harder for you.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
do. So maybe that's something we can work on over the summer.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I kept wanting to point out that August is our time off.
I have a
So-
suspicion that's going to go by very quickly.
I think we need to start in June doing the evaluation of the budget. And I heard Teresa say very clearly
Mhm.
that we will have the CAFR done in October.
And see, that's not unusual. I mean, back in the day, we met and started in October.
Yeah.
You know, St. John's having those
Yes.
presentations by department heads. So they were already starting to think about they had already made some decisions about what they needed for their departments. They know. So,
A corollary to our compensation philosophy is something that we have long known about but not addressed, which is our workers' comp philosophy. The state law is very clear. The practice in the city has been to, I think the term of art is, make the employee whole. The state law says you get 2/3 of your salary and you're on it for a limited time. And our practice has been you get that from the state and then we supplement it to make you whole, not only in salary, but also in continuing to earn sick leave and annual leave and those sorts of things. So we had that case that precipitated this where the person kept earning enough leave that they could use the leave and stay. They could have been on comp forever.
Yeah.
And of course, state law says you can only be on it for 2 months, and then some disposition has to happen. You either need to leave the job or to be cared fit for duty. And I think there are some provisions for turning that over to give another 2-month period or another 2-month period. But
well,
anyway.
and we've had lawsuits against us as the city because we have not been consistent with that practice.
Consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds, and we are definitely not the hobgoblin.
So, all right, well, I guess those people out in the hall were not here for this
Nope.
committee. All right,
Okay.
so, next meeting, do we want to get back to the comp and class study?
Yeah, although we'll be getting into it in finance, for sure.
The other thing is the adequate public facility ordinance.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
left open until the next meeting,
Yeah. So that'll,
so that'll be on the agenda.
right.
Ms. Green, can you think of anything else that would be on our agenda?
Depends. You have I think maybe 2 that are with the planning commission.
Why
Or
did
else
the,
they would have been on this agenda.
This Truxton Park wet slip, has that come to us?
Still open.
Oh, that's being left open?
That's the Mission Barbecue.
Mm-hmm. But that doesn't come to rules.
And I haven't looked at the
it goes,
resolution from.
Economic matters, environmental matters, and finance.
right. Why is economic matter continually being canceled?
No legislation.
That's a good
Who chairs
reason.
that?
Mark.
Don't.
Well, I think they're encouraging committees that don't have any legislation
To not meet,
to not meet.
yeah. There's no reason,
Sometimes
we
there's-
like one another, but, we'll see one another plenty. When will we get the budget books?
Apparently not till tomorrow.
I was gonna say not ever. Okay.
Wow. Turn your mic off.
All right, we're gonna adjourn this meeting. And
d-
anything else?
Well, I was just curious, how would you like to handle the adequate public facility ordinance,
The what?
the school capacity ordinance when that comes? Do you want to, and did you have anybody in mind to invite, or, I'm
I
just
think some
wondering how you want to go
people
about that
will be
discussion.
Coming, I cannot help but, probably Alan's son will be coming. Is it Stephen? Steve?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we should have Alex Zaknovich come
Yeah.
from the Board of Ed.
Chris, I'm almost finishing the meeting. Can I
What about the Education Commission?
And Trish, we can invite Trish Urban, but I'm sure a couple of those others ladies will want to come independently.
Is that how you refer to them?
I'm being generous.
As a gentleman.
Okay, we're still on.
No, you're not.
Yeah, we adjourned, right?
Yeah, you adjourned.
No.
No, we haven't, did we?
Yes, you did. You started.
Did somebody
Oh, I
second
said
it
we
then?
have to adjourn. We didn't take a vote, but I'm good if you're
That's
good.
okay.
Oh,
That's okay. Motion,
okay.
motion
So we
accepted.
adjourned.